Good afternoon. We're going to wait one more minute before beginning. Thank you. Good afternoon and welcome to today's presentation. My name is Max Joel. I am the Assistant Director for the New York Sun program at NYSERDA, and today we'll be reviewing the upcoming relaunches of the Inclusive Community Solar Adder and the expanded Solar for All program. Next slide, please. I'll start with some meeting procedures and housekeeping. Today's webinar is being recorded. A copy of the recording and the slides will be posted on the New York Sun website, and we will be sending out an email with those links to everyone who attends. We have a lot of people on the webinar today, so we have muted everyone, but we've set up the Q&A feature on the side for questions to be submitted at any time. We are going to hold responses until the end, and we've allowed for quite a bit of time at the end to address questions that come in. Finally, if you do experience any technical problems, please contact my colleague Dylan Cunningham at the email address shown on screen. I'll just pause here for a minute so that folks can take a screenshot or write down that email address. Okay, next slide, please. So on the agenda for today, I'll be giving a brief introduction and background on the programs. Then I'll be turning things over to my colleague Sarah Jayanthi. Sarah will go over the ICSA program rules and really focus in on the adjustments and changes that have been made for the relaunch of the ICSA compared to the previous round of the program from last year. I'll note that we will be going uh, into some depth here. Um, uh, the presentation is really targeted at people who have either reviewed the ICSA rules or the proposed rules in previous stakeholder feedback rounds, or have worked with projects that have participated in the first round. So we are going to get pretty dense and it may go pretty fast, but again, the webinar is being recorded. The presentations will be posted, and I should say now we will be coming out with the complete final and formal set of program rules in our program manual in the coming weeks. Sarah will reiterate this point, but I do just want to emphasize that we've tried to be as thorough and as final as possible in the information submitted in this webinar. However, some details may change between now and the publication of the program manual, and in all cases, the program manual as published will be the controlling document. Uh, Finally, once we go through the ICSA, I will be giving a brief preview of the second round of the expanded Solar for All program, specifically the RFP to select community solar projects to participate in that program with National Grid. We are anticipating that these two programs will be reopened at approximately the same time. And then finally, there'll be some more information about applying, and we will then take it to the Q&A. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So I'll kick us off by giving a little bit of background of the Inclusive Community Solar Adder program. Fundamentally, the goal of this program is to increase access to community solar for LMI households and residents of disadvantaged communities, as well as affordable housing and smaller nonprofits and DACs. The ICSA has been a core part of the New York Sun's solar energy equity framework since that was originally approved back in May of 2020. And we had a very extensive first round that was administered in 2021 and 2022. Um, Sarah will of course be going into much more detail about the structure, but the basic idea is that Higher New York Sun incentives are available for projects in the capacity within a project that incorporate residents of disadvantaged communities and other eligible customers and provide a higher bill discount and meet other program requirements. Next slide, please. So with this, I can turn it over um, well, actually, I'll cover this slide as well. Sorry. So just go to a little bit to the development timeline. As I mentioned, we had a successful first round in 2021 and 2022. We had anticipated opening the second round much sooner than we have, and we've gone through a couple of rounds of stakeholder feedback. The extended delay between closing the first round, opening this new round has been both to receive really detailed feedback from all the stakeholders, and I'll express my appreciation to everyone who took the time to talk to us or to submit written feedback. We really took that very, very seriously and used it extensively, as I think you'll see. But then finally, we also needed the time to adjust the program to the Inflation Reduction Act and the potential for bonus tax credits for projects participating in the ICSA. And we'll talk a lot more about that in a little while. In parallel, we have been administering the expanded Solar for All program with our partners at National Grid, and have likewise been awaiting the full IRA process, or at least guidance process, to play out before re-releasing both programs. So with that, we can go to the next slide. And I will turn it over to my colleague, Sarah Jayanthi. Thank you very much.
All right. First of all, can you hear me, John?
Yes, I can, loud and clear.
Perfect. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Max. As he said, my name is Sarah Jayanthi, and I'm here to talk about the final program rules for round 2 of the Inclusive Community Solar Adder. We're very excited to be here today, presenting these final rules to you and getting one step closer to launching this program. We know it's been a very long wait, and there has been a lot of unexpected events that caused us to pause the launch, but it's great to be here today, and I think we've got a great program for New York State. So next slide. So before I get started, I wanted to talk about the structure of this presentation. I know Max had alluded to it in his opening remarks. So for today's presentation, we're going to go into a deep dive of the final program rules, and all of the rules are listed in this presentation. You know, as Max had mentioned, there's a lot of slides in this presentation, so I won't be going through all of them in depth. However, we intentionally put everything in the slide deck so that you can go back and read the program rules in depth, you know, following the presentation. There are changes between what we're publishing today and what we published in spring 2023, which was kind of the last set of draft rules. For ease of use, we have created a blue button icon so you can see kind of what slides show some updated rules. You can see that in the top right corner. I also wanted to say a quick disclaimer that this presentation is describing the program rules, but the final rules really are going to be in the program manual, and this isn't a binding document. If there's any difference between what's in this presentation and in the program manual is the controlling document. So once we release the program manual, contractors, you should read those rules in depth. Next slide, please. So the first section we're going to talk about is project eligibility. Next slide. And as Max mentioned, if anything hasn't changed, I'm going to go pretty quickly, but it's all in here so that you can go back and read it later. So, so for the final rules of project eligibility, these are really the same that what you saw in the draft rules. Nothing has changed here. I wanted to take a moment and just stress the change between round one and round two, which is that for round two of the ICSA, no less than 40% of the project capacity can be dedicated to eligible subscribers, and 50% of whatever that ICSA portion is needs to be dedicated to residential subscribers, so residential customers. Next slide, please. So this is a very important point that we want to emphasize and stress. So you will see here in the presentation that we've put together an illustration that demonstrates that. So please look at this and make sure you understand kind of very important piece of the ICSA. Next slide. So continuing on with project eligibility, projects in Long Island are not eligible for the ICSA. That's an important thing to note. These are all rules that were in the draft rules, but I'll go over them high level. Projects that are awarded ICSA in round one cannot withdraw their application and resubmit to the round two funding levels. However, if a project applied and they weren't awarded for whatever reason, they are able to apply for round two. And then finally, projects, if you decide that you want to enroll in Expanded Solar for All, which I know Max is going to talk about when I'm done speaking, you will have to cancel your ICSA award. You can't be awarded both an ICSA and an Expanded Solar for All. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is actually a new section that wasn't in the draft rules that you saw in the spring. This really just shows, the importance of DER supplier registration and the compliance to the UBP DERS. That has always been a requirement, but we're just doing a greater call out in the final rules that you're seeing here. So primary contractors, customer acquisition providers, and any subcontractors that are interacting directly with customers must register as DER suppliers and comply with the UBP. Another thing we want to highlight that NYSERDA, as part of the application review process, we are going to start to be working more closely with DPS just to confirm that project teams and the members of project teams are in good standing and don't have any kind of active issues like an order to show cause. Next slide, please. All right, so that was the first section on project eligibility. We're going to dive right into the incentive levels. Next slide. So starting off with the incentive levels and capacity for upstate, you will notice that nothing has changed here from the proposed rules in the spring. So we are going to have the same at our capacity block at 860 megawatts. We're going to have the same dollars per watt, and the same project types are going to be able to participate in the ICSA. So nothing's changing between those draft rules and the final rules for this. Next slide. Great. The same goes for community benefit projects that are located in the upstate region. So same adder per watt as we published in the spring, and the same project types. And I just wanted to make a note that the capacity for the community benefit projects draws from that total 860 megawatt block that you saw on the previous slide. So next slide, please. So for the incentive levels for Con Ed, we did make a big update. So when the commission issued the MPR order earlier in the summer, it gave NYSERDA more flexibility on how to handle the Con Ed incentive. And so what we decided to do, based on the feedback that we got from industry, desiring to have the same minimum guaranteed discount in Con Ed of 10% that their colleagues working in upstate also had, that we were able to then reduce that minimum discount down to the 10%. So Con Ed projects no longer required to do 15% as the minimum guaranteed discount. However, as a result, we are also kind of adjusting that adder per watt to take into consideration the adjustment of the discount rate. So it's now 20 cents a watt. We did get a lot of feedback on this, and we're really glad that we got that flexibility to make these adjustments. All right, next slide. And you will see that for the community benefit projects that are in the Con Ed region, that we also made an adjustment kind of based on the just the standard Con Ed ICSA rate. And just as a reminder, capacity will be drawn from the larger Con Ed block of 100 megawatts. All right, next slide. So just a quick overview here of what community benefit projects are. I know there has been some interest in this higher incentive that a project can get if they can provide a higher bill discount and incorporate measures that provide greater benefit to the communities. I'm not going to go through this here today. Kind of the high level requirements are listed here. And also in the appendix, we have listed the detailed requirements for if you do want to do a community benefit project, how you demonstrate that you're going to meet each criteria. Just a reminder that if you provide a 20% bill discount to customers, you only have to meet 3 of these criteria. If you provide a 15% bill discount, you have to meet all 5. So next slide. And actually, I'll do this one and then I'll take a break. So the next slide is about, this is a new kind of section of the proposed, of the rules. So this wasn't in the spring draft. So we just wanted to provide like a clear definition of the bill discount that must be provided to customers. The reason why we included this is we just, again, wanted clarity on, what the bill credit discount needs to be, and then how it should be calculated. So an important thing that I just want to note for everybody is sorry, I'll just take a minute. Just an important thing to note for everyone is that the bill discount can't be degraded by any additional product that's on a customer subscription. So for example, if a customer signed up for community solar and they also were signed up kind of for an ESCO project and it was all part of the same contract and the ESCO product reduced that bill credit discount, that's not allowed under the program. The bill discount does have to stay what it needs to be and it can't be degraded. All right, next slide. I'm going to take a quick water break. Okay. Oh, actually, I'm just going to do this one. So this is probably a topic that everybody on the call is interested in, which is how NYSERDA is going to handle a project that receives the bonus tax credits, which are now named the low-income community bonus credits. So, I'm sure everybody saw when the rules came out that projects are required, if they receive a category 4 allocation, that projects are required to provide a 20% bill discount, which is more than NYSERDA's requirement of a 10% bill discount. So if a project with an ICSA award receives a category 4 allocation, NYSERDA will not adjust their ICSA award level. So that's a really important thing for everybody to just note. However, we will require that 20% bill discount gets applied to all of the ICSA eligible customers on the project. Because for category 4, it doesn't have to be 100% of the project that gets that 20% bill discount. But if you receive a category 4 allocation, you need to extend that 20% bill credit discount to all the ICSA eligible customers. We do encourage projects to apply for the low-income bonus credits. Submittal of an application or allocation of bonus credits in other categories won't trigger a change in the ICSA bill credit discount rate. And then finally, I just wanted to note that there is this link here that kind of provides more detail into the low-income bonus credit program. we can't really provide any more detail beyond what's on this slide. So if you have any questions about the low-income bonus credits, we recommend that you look at this website and also talk to the folks at Treasury and the DOE. Next slide, please. All right, now I will take a little bit of a water break, and then we're on to eligible subscribers. All right, I am back. So next slide, please. So for eligible subscribers for an ICSA project, a project must allocate between 40 and 100% of the project capacity to ICSA eligible subscribers, whether they be residential or non-residential. But then as I had mentioned earlier, 50% of whatever that ICSA portion has to be residential customers. Just an important thing that an individual customer may only be on a single project, so you can't move a customer around just to get the ICSA. And then master metered properties can be considered either residential or non-residential. I'm going to spend a good amount of time on affordable housing in this presentation, so we'll talk about that later. Next slide, please. So just high level, the residential subscriber rules haven't changed between the spring release and now, the spring draft rules and now, other than kind of how we're treating affordable housing, which I'll talk about later. So for residential customers to be, you need to deem them eligible using one of the 4 verification methods that are listed below at the third bullet. Any residential electric customer, once they're deemed eligible and allocated up to a project, they're considered eligible for the duration of the project. So you don't have to go back and redetermine their income status if they've already been on the project. We don't want to penalize people for improving or having like an improvement of their income. And so what I'm going to talk about today, or not today, right now, is just the top 3 income verification methods, and I'll talk about affordable housing a little bit later. So next slide, please. So categorical eligibility, that's when you can use a proxy, a proxy program to demonstrate a customer is income eligible. This is not changing between what we proposed in the spring and what is coming out now. I just wanted to let everybody know, I think one of the topics we got a lot of comments on is, adding more proxies to categorical eligibility. I know Medicare was one that folks asked about. We're really using a list that's developed by kind of our in-house low to moderate income experts, which are NYSERDA's energy affordability team. So we really work closely with them, and they're the ones that set up the list. So as requests come in, we are working with them to see if they make sense kind of to add to categorical eligibility. But this is what we have for the next round of ICSA. Next slide, please. So the next verification method that's allowed is geo eligibility for residential subscribers. This hasn't changed between the spring and the final. If customers reside in a DAC that's defined by the final DAC map, which the link is on the slide, or if they live in an Empower pre-screened area, that link is also on the slide. They can just be considered eligible without providing additional documentation. And for round 2, self-attestation is not required for customers verified through geo eligibility. But I want to stress that if you have round 1 projects, you still have to collect self-attestation. It's a different map that's being used for round 1. It's an interim DAC map, so we still need self-attestation collected. That's being said, that if you want to opt into the round 2 criteria, which I will talk about later, round 1 projects do have that option. And we can go through that process later. Next slide. So the final kind of residential subscriber verification that I'm going to talk about right now is individual household eligibility. This is what we kind of think of as the option of last resort because it is very cumbersome for the customer. So if a customer has any way to document what their true household income is, and a lot of times we're talking about tax returns, they can submit that to kind of be verified as an ICSA eligible customer. The big change that we're making for round two is that providers are no longer able to just collect that information and store it themselves. If customers want to do this process, or if they want to be verified using income documentation, they need to submit it through the Affordable Solar Incentive Eligibility application. And the reason why we're doing this is because a lot of the documentation that's required to demonstrate individual household eligibility is sensitive. And we think the best pathway for these customers is to submit that documentation through a process that's already been established to be safe. And the customer, by submitting that documentation to us and we review it and we send a letter back saying you're verified, we think that that's kind of the best pathway for the customer's personal information safety. So next slide, please. All right. So we just spent the past few slides talking about the residential subscribers, how to verify residential subscribers that are ICSA eligible. This slide really, oh, no, come back. Come back, John. Thank you. This slide is really about the non-residential subscribers and how a non-residential subscriber can be deemed eligible. So the allowed non-residential subscribers are nonprofits and public facilities that are small subscribers. So they have to have an average peak monthly demand of less than 25 kilowatts. Public schools, if they qualify for PON 4924, can also be considered eligible. And again, this was in the final or in the draft rules that we saw in the spring. So there's nothing new here. And then affordable housing, again, you can do affordable housing. Affordable housing accounts can either be considered residential or non-residential. And so owner meters, common area meters are considered non-residential subscribers. So next slide. All right. And now we get into kind of where we had some of the biggest updates in the program. So for the final rules of round two, we did a pretty significant update on our affordable housing verification process, really taking into consideration a lot of great stuff that's happening at other states and at the federal level. So if you are interested in signing up affordable housing properties, this is how it has to work. So first and foremost, an affordable housing property needs to provide proof that their building is an affordable housing building. In the next slide, you're going to see what the list of documentation is that's allowed. And a very important piece of this that I think sometimes gets missed is that the documentation has to have specific information that NYSERDA needs to look at and confirm. So it needs to have the specific addresses covered and also what the income requirements are for that building. If we don't see those, we can't really determine if that property is in fact eligible for the ICSA. That documentation has to be deemed qualified by NYSERDA prior to submitting for your ICSA invoice, but that's so basically when you're submitting for your other deliverables, it has to be for then. And then, as I mentioned earlier, hold on, I'm just going to go to the next slide, that, first we have to determine the building, if the building is an affordable housing building through documentation. The second piece of it is determining if, of the accounts that are on the building, which ones are the residential subscribers and which ones are the non-residential. And that really is based on the property characteristics and the account types. So we're going to dive right in now. Let's go to the next slide. So here is the list of affordable housing documentation that is going to be allowed. A big update, Dylan, I realized we kept the exclamation point. The big update is that the following building types were eligible in round one under the ICSA, and they're no longer going to be eligible under round two as qualified buildings. And it's really properties that fall in the 80/20 program. And in New York, the New York State agency that administers 80/20 grants is New York State Housing Finance Agency, and then New York City projects sometimes the administration is through New York City Housing Development Corporation. So if a building is an 80/20 building, it will no longer qualify as an eligible subscriber under the ICSA. But this is the list of affordable housing documentation, kind of what the acceptable proxies are and the detail of what we need in the proxy that you collect. Next slide, please. All right, 1 minute. So for non-residential subscribers, I had mentioned this in an earlier slide, you know, if it's a common area meter, it's a meter for an owner, that is considered a non-residential eligible subscriber. If a master metered property is not sub-metered and they're not passing the savings on to the residents, and they don't qualify for the pass-through exemption that we allow, those are going to be non-residential subscribers. So if you're talking to properties that are master metered and you want them to count as a residential subscriber, it's really important that they know that passing the savings on to the customer is the way that they are going to be able to be counted as a residential subscriber. So next slide, please. So let's talk about residential subscribers. So for affordable housing customer accounts to be considered residential subscribers, it has to be somehow connected to the resident. So, you know, for projects that are not master metered, that's a completely different situation. It really has to be the accounts that the residents are on. The residents have to have their own electric accounts and pay their own electricity bills. The residence in the property has to be within the income limits of the program. And that means the entire residence of the property, which is 80% AMI or below. And then finally, participation in the community solar can't result in increased costs to the residents. So you can't increase their rent or their common charges because that could kind of kick off the utility allowance mechanism. And so we really want to make sure that when talking to the affordable housing providers, make sure that they can't increase costs just because they've signed up for the community solar subscription. All right, next slide, please. To figure out where I am in my notes. Okay. So this is, I think, another section that a lot of folks have had questions about for round two of the ICSA. So we're going to devote a good amount of time on it. The master metered affordable housing. So for a project that decides to allocate some of their capacity to a master metered affordable housing property, that property could be considered either a residential capacity or non-residential capacity, depending on specific requirements. And I mentioned this in early slides that to be considered eligible residential capacity, the project must distribute their savings to the building residents. If the property cannot do that, it would then fall into a non-residential subscriber. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk through kind of the different types of potential master metered properties and how they can demonstrate that they are passing on their savings. So for a property that is sub-metered, your life is a little bit easier. You need to specify how the required bill discount or its equivalent will be provided to the building residents who are the eligible residential subscribers. And that bill credit discount has to equal what they would have received had they signed up for community solar themselves. And we you know, this should be possible because if a property is sub-metered, they know how much their residents are spending on electricity, and they should be able to, you know, right size whatever the discount will be. If requested by NYSERDA, the building will be required to demonstrate that the savings is actually being applied to the accounts of sub-metered building occupants. This is actually a requirement for round one. We're just stressing it again for round two. You know, we need to know that the savings are actually going to the residents per the rules of the program. Next slide. So if a property is not submetered, it's a little bit more challenging, but the federal government has made it a lot easier for us. So first, the project must demonstrate that like how the value will be distributed to the building residents. So if a community solar project allocates to a master metered affordable housing property that isn't submetered, they have to demonstrate kind of whatever that value is going to be, what gets distributed to the building residents. New for the program, for the final program, this is a change from spring 2023, is that we've actually set a minimum value. So a minimum of 50% of the value of whatever that community solar savings is from the community solar allocation on that master metered account must be distributed to the building residents. The question you're probably asking is how? How do we do this distribution? What's allowed, what's not allowed? So what we're allowing is anything that has been indicated by HUD as an allowed building or value distribution mechanism. So HUD put out this guidance earlier this year that said kind of what was allowed community solar like distribution activities and what wasn't allowed. And so NYSERDA is just following the guidance that's listed in HUD. There are a handful of allowed mechanisms in the HUD guidance that we will not allow for. So for example, there's one around staff support. The final program rules will list what is allowed, what isn't allowed in detail, what is allowed and what is not allowed in detail. I want to make sure I didn't trip over that. And I recommend you looking at this link and really diving into that memo. You know, it's a great thing to just look at very closely after this call. So next slide, please. Okay. So how a project can demonstrate that they are meeting the requirement around pass-through. On this slide is the system that we had set up. So at the time of application, the project needs to submit basically a statement. It really should come from the community, from the affordable housing provider that indicates the building's commitment sorry, everybody, to distribute no less than 50% of the value of the community solar savings. We want to see an estimate of what they think that total value will be. And we need described which HUD compliant mechanisms are going to be used for that distribution. So we need to see kind of that there's a commitment, how much it will be, and what are the mechanisms that are going to be used. When the project is ready to submit their deliverable milestones, so their allocation form, their post-summary report, their subscriber template, at that time of submission, we also need to see an affidavit from the affordable housing property that essentially says that the benefit sharing statement, the information in the benefit sharing statement has been implemented. So we need to know that it has been enacted. It can't just be promised. We need to know that it has been put in place. And of course, NYSERDA reserves the right to request kind of additional detail, including asset management reports and other accounting documentation, so that we can actually see that what the affidavit says actually is happening. And we reserve the right to request that backup. Next slide. All right. So there is one type of property that can receive this exemption. I first want to note that this exemption actually came from stakeholder feedback. So we do read all the feedback. We can't always incorporate everything, but for some of it, if we realize it's something that we've missed, we absolutely look at it and we figure out the best way to incorporate it. So master meter properties that are characterized as HDFC or MHA cooperatives. And so what this means is it's low income or moderate income housing cooperatives. they can apply for an exemption from the value distribution requirement. The reason is that HDFCs and MHAs, they are multifamily properties where everybody is an owner, right? They all have an equal share of the property. So if it all goes into one account, there is some kind of governance model where the community decides together how to use that money. So it keeps with our rules that at the end of the day, it's the residents living there have to benefit from the savings. There are specific requirements on how to demonstrate that a property is HDFC or MHA. You can see them listed here. And also to demonstrate that the building is cooperatively owned. That's a very important component of this. Next slide. Great. So something else that is new from the proposed spring rules is that we're no longer offering a pass-through exemption for master metered buildings that, due to their regulations, can't give additional dollars to their residential occupants that come from a community solar subscription. So that was, something that we had put in for entities like public housing authorities. The reason why we made this change is actually the HUD guidance, which I referenced earlier, has a lot of flexibility around it, so that things that are kind of allowed mechanisms to distribute value don't just have to be dollars, they can be tenant benefiting activities. So because of the increased flexibility from HUD, and HUD is one of the primary regulators of these affordable housing properties, we felt like this exemption is now no longer needed for the round 2 rules. So next slide. All right, we are done with eligible subscribers. I'm going to take a quick water break. Getting on mute to do that. Okay, and I'm back. Gonna take a quick, this section is pretty quick. We're gonna talk about application submission and review. This is going to be a high level section because we will actually be publishing a walkthrough of how to fill out the ICSA application. And we're creating an instructional video as part, that will be that walkthrough. So that will go into much more depth. I'm just talking high level just to prepare you for when the application is actually available. So first slide, or next slide, not the first slide. So first of all, this is again the same as the rules that you saw in the spring. Projects need to have a parent commercial, industrial, or non-residential incentive application. And the project can be an approved, submitted, or received status to prepare an ICSA application. However, we can't award the ICSA until that commercial, industrial, or non-residential application has been approved. So if you're a project that your CNI or non-res app is in submitted status or received status, we won't be able to approve your application, as I said, until that parent application is approved. And your review will be deprioritized. We're really going to focus on reviewing the applications where the projects are in approved status, whose parent projects are in approved status. This has been said before, but I wanted to reiterate, we closed the program for longer than we anticipated. So projects that achieved commercial operation between when we closed the program to when we opened the program can submit for round 2 ICSA. Very important note, those projects have to follow the round 2 rules. So if your subscriber criteria is slightly different, you will have to follow those round 2 rules to receive the round 2 incentive. All right, next slide, please. All right. This is just high level, some kind of operational components of it. The contractor and the payee on the parent New York Sun project have to be the same as the contractor and the payee on the ICSA. If you are doing a full assignment or a payment assignment, It will result in an assignment of the ICSA. Contractors, if you know that you're going to be doing an assignment, we recommend that you actually tell NYSERDA ahead of time. And we actually have an expedited assignment process. If you do the assignment kind of after you're notified of the award, but before we issue the award letter for the ICSA. So we highly recommend you loop us in early if you're planning on assigning the project and you're already having conversations about it. And then finally, I mentioned this earlier, we're going to have an application guide. We're going to have a walkthrough. All of that will be posted on the New York Sun Resource for Contractors page. Okay, next slide. Portfolio project submission. I'm not going to go into detail around this, but just know that portfolio project submission is still going to be happening for the round 2 program. So projects where you have the same acquisition provider and subscription team and engagement team, and you're using the same strategy, you only have to submit one detailed application to us where you indicate kind of all of the detail about what your plan is. And then for each, once you get that primary application approved, and NYSERDA has awarded it, the contractor can then kind of submit the rest of the projects that are part of that portfolio that are all working with the same project team and going to do the same strategy. And those applications that are part of that portfolio get to do a shorter application. It's called the subsequent application. So next slide. Okay. This is just a high level, or this is actually a listing of the application elements that are going to be required to be submitted as part of the ICSA application. You will notice that, we will indicate which ones are required for the primary and then which ones are required for the subsequent. Next slide, please. Great. And so, yeah, it's a long list. So we continued on to the second page. And you'll see here that, there are several pieces, including that marketing and implementation plan, that only need to be submitted in the primary application. One change that I wanted to make note of, I realized we forgot to put the button on this one, is that, in the original spring rule, in the draft rules in the spring, we did say that we would require seeing the contract between the primary contractor and the subscription provider, just to confirm that they're in a late enough stage and will be working together on the ICSA projects. We got a lot of feedback on that, so we went back and we looked at it. And the new rule is that we need to see an affidavit. The affidavit has to clearly demonstrate the relationship between the primary contractor and the subscription provider and the roles and responsibilities. So I think the reason for that contract is we wanted to make sure that the relationship with the contractor and the subscription provider was at a late enough stage to apply. What we don't want to see is multiple possible customer acquisition providers on an application. Something that we saw last year is that an application would come in and they would say, look, there are these 5 people that we're thinking of working with, can we kind of conduct the review with all 5? That's not possible for round 2. You have to be farther enough along in your process where you have your acquisition provider selected that you want to work with on those specific projects. And those are the acquisition providers that are on the application. And that is the acquisition provider on the application. Next slide, please. Great. Marketing implementation plan, that is still a requirement as part of the ICSA. You can see what the sections are here. One thing to just quickly note, the form for the marketing and implementation plan is updated and different for round 2. So providers, I know you maybe want to get a head start and start to use that round 1 M&I form. That's not going to be possible. We have updated it. You can definitely start building out sections like team experience, marketing and sales strategy, customer engagement, but just know there are specific questions that are not on the round 1 form that we are now asking for round 2. So please use the correct form. Next slide. Oh, and one thing I forgot to mention is that if application materials are incorrect or anything is missing, we reserve the right to reject your application. So please, please do everything completely. Thank you. All right, next slide is this is the door-to-door sales plan. I think as folks know that in the spring rules, we did announce that we're allowing door-to-door sales if certain criteria are met. The only change here is that clarification around when that verification phone call needs to happen, where the customer confirms that they're still interested in signing up for community solar. It needs to happen after the customer signs up, obviously, but as long as it happens before the customer, gets assigned to a project. So, if there's a bit of a delay between the sign up and when you're actually ready to allocate that customer, that's when it needs to happen. But the customer just needs to know before they get allocated on a project that they need to be reminded that they did sign up and confirm if they still do want to be on the project. All right, next slide. Application review, nothing has changed here. So I'll just say quickly that if projects don't have if applications don't have missing materials or incomplete information, we are planning to process an award within 60 days of application submission. And another thing to note is that even if a primary application is approved, subsequent applications may get rejected. We are going to be looking at things across a portfolio. So if we feel like the portfolio is too large based on what we saw in that primary application, we might only accept some of the subsequent applications and not all of them. All right, next slide. So project changes, a contractor has to notify NYSERDA if kind of the following changes take place after a project is approved. This is really around any kind of change that could affect the customer, especially if the customer signed up for something and now they're getting something completely different. We need to know that ahead of time. And we will have a process on how you can put that request in. Next slide. Okay, and then finally, for round one awards, if you want to use the round two eligible subscriber criteria, including if you want to do geo eligibility without having to collect self-attestation, we do have a pathway for you to be able to do that, but you also have to agree to additional terms that are not on round one awards that are now on the round two awards. And those are the additional criteria around door-to-door, the long-term subscriber makeup criteria, and then also the adjustments around the bonus ITC. So we will have a form that you can submit if you are interested in using the round two criteria. Next slide. Okay, guys, we are in the home stretch. This is the second to last section. This is going to be, and then after that, we're going to be done soon, and Max will quickly talk, and we'll go to Q&A. So let's get started on milestones and payments. Next slide. Sorry, I should have said that, John. I'm sorry. So for milestone submission, this is really about once you're awarded on the project, how do you submit your deliverables and how do you get paid? What we're doing for round two, this was described in the draft rules, so nothing has changed here, is that you're going to have to submit your deliverables before you submit your invoice, deliverables being the allocation form, the subscriber template, the host summary report, that has to be submitted before you submit your invoice. If your project has affordable housing properties on it, you have to submit that documentation that I had mentioned, so kind of the regulatory agreements, that also has to be submitted at the time of milestone submission. Okay, next slide. So this is just what the schedule is for the milestones. First month, milestone one is for the first month of credits going to the customer. Milestone 2 is first month of the second year. Milestone 3 is first month of the third year. And it really is, the timeline is really predicated on when that first month of credits goes to the customer. You'll see here kind of in the second row, the required deliverables that have to be submitted for each milestone. And then I also want to bring your attention to the last row where we talk about what the payment looks like. And the payment is always going to be based on the actual capacity that's allocated to eligible subscribers. So next slide, please. Okay, I thought there was a slide about how that looks. So I can talk about it pretty quickly. So, oh yeah, and this is just kind of more detail that we had tried to fit on the first slide, but it was too small. I won't be going over it, but it is important to know. All right, next slide. Okay, the ICSA fund. Well, actually, before I go on to this slide, let me just quickly talk about actual allocations. So, for example, if you have an award and you are able to fill your project with 50% ICSA customers, even though your award letter, as it says here, is for 60% of the total capacity, we're only going to pay you for what your actual allocation is. So we're only paying you for that 50%. Also around the ICSA funding amount, was also in the spring rules, is that contracted projects that allocate more than 60% of their project capacity to eligible subscribers, they could be eligible to receive additional funds. It really is dependent on whether or not there's funding availability. And I'll go into detail around that because I know we've had a lot of questions about that. Next slide. So yeah, this is the example that I thought was earlier, which this just shows in detail, whatever you actually allocate to the subscribers, that's actually what you get as your invoice payment. It's based on the actual allocation. So next slide, please. Okay, so this is a pretty big change from round, sorry, I got lots of my notes, so I just need a minute. So what we're seeing here is actually a clarification on how the funding adjustments will work if your project is able to allocate more than 50 or more than 60% of the project capacity to eligible subscribers. So we had told you that this was possible, but now we're going to tell you what the process is going to be. So if a project is able to allocate more than 60% of their project to eligible subscribers, what NYSERDA will do is actually increase the project's overall award to the next higher band of the eligible subscriber target. That might sound confusing to you. There's a slide that describes it. The project will then be eligible to get up to what that higher band is for the rest of the project. This increase can only happen at the first milestone. So at the time of commercial operation, or prior to commercial operation. In the event that there are no additional funds, NYSERDA will pay for the actual allocation of dedicated subscribers until the award is exhausted. So for the first two bullets, I'm going to talk about them now. And then for the next bullet, I'll talk about it just right after. So let's go to the next slide. So this is a scenario where a project was able to allocate 70% of the project to eligible subscribers, which is more than the 60% in the award letter. They were able to do this, before that commercial operation invoice, that invoice number 1, milestone number 1. So you'll see here that we would pay out based on the actual allocation of eligible subscribers. Next slide, please. And then what we would do is, because the project was able to allocate 70% of the capacity to eligible subscribers, we would bring them up to the next band of eligible subscriber target. So folks in round 1 know how this is, right? We had 20 to 40, 40 to 60, 60 to 80. So because everybody's getting awarded at a 40 to 60% eligible subscriber target range, this project would then get an updated award letter that now shows a 60 to 80% eligible eligible subscriber target range. It would result in an increased award. And it would also mean that the project for the next kind of 3 payments, or the next second and third payment, would have the opportunity to get up to that 80%, because they were in the next band of eligible subscriber target. If this is confusing, I completely understand. We tried to make this as clear as possible, but please let me know if you have any questions about that. Next slide. So this describes what happens if we did run out of money in that second fund, that high performance fund. So I will say there's a very low possibility around that, and I'll go into why. Actually, sorry, folks, I lost track of my slides. Okay, so actually, I'll just take a moment to talk about this high performance fund, because what you're seeing here, which is the money running out of the high performance fund, there's actually going to be a very low possibility of that. And projects shouldn't worry about not being compensated if they are able to go above 60% of their capacity to eligible subscribers, because it's really in NYSERDA's best interest that you sign up more and have more customers on your projects. So what NYSERDA has been able to do is that for that high performance fund, it will have enough dollars so that if every project that is awarded the ICSA in round 2 achieves an 80% eligible subscriber target, they will be able to get fully compensated. So there's going to be enough of a cushion in there where if every project was able to hit an 80% eligible subscriber target, they would be compensated. From what we've seen from round 1, 80% is a very difficult target to hit. So projects should feel very, very comfortable that they'll be able to have money for whatever their actual target is. So what I'm describing here, though, is if that fund did run out of money. So you'll see in this example, this project got more than 70% eligible subscriber targets, eligible subscribers, but the fund is out of money for whatever reason. Next slide. And in that situation, what we will do is we will pay out based on the actual allocation of eligible subscribers until the funds are exhausted. So you'll see in the award was 300,000. So we would pay round 1 for payment number 1 at 70% because we have enough funds to do that. For payment 2, we'll also pay at the 70% eligible subscriber target because we still have enough money to be able to pay that out. Payment 3 will be basically whatever is left. So it's the original $300,000 award amount minus what's already been paid out, which is the $262,500. And that's really what payment 3 will be. Again, we really feel like there's going to be a low possibility of needing to be able to do that, but we wanted to also be transparent that if it did happen, this is how it would work. All right, next slide. These are just, this slide and the next slide are just other potential scenarios. If a project ends up facing it, how we would do the payout. We actually already talked about this in the spring, so I'm not going to go over it in detail. This first scenario is what would happen if a project achieved more than 40% of the project with ICSA customers, but less than 50% of those customers are residential. Next slide. And this slide is really about if a project can't hit their minimums, if they can't get that 40% of the capacity to eligible subscribers, or if less than 20% of the capacity is residential. Next slide. This is going to be my second to last slide. So this just says that the subscribers have to maintain their documentation because NYSERDA reserves the right to conduct audits. Projects probably already know that because we've already conducted a couple of audits. Next slide. And then finally, this is the language around the long-term subscriber makeup. This is not changing between the draft rules that you saw and the final rules. But I did want to stress that for this requirement, if through our randomized audit process, we do find that a project is not compliant anymore. They don't have the same percentage or greater of subscribers that are ICSA eligible, and they're not providing the same bill discount rate. There will be a time to remedy. So you don't feel like if we find out that you haven't done it, that you'll get an automatic penalty. We are going to have a remedy process, but just for everybody's awareness, this is a very important part of the program. We're providing funds to make sure that the benefits go to ICSA eligible subscribers, and we want to make sure that those projects continue to support those types of customers. And with that, next slide. I think that's me. And Max, I'm going to hand it back to you. And I don't know how long I took.
Hi, thank you, Sarah. Good afternoon again, everyone. So now I'll briefly provide a preview of the second round of the Expanded Solar for All RFP. Next slide, please. So Expanded Solar for All, as many of you on the webinar are aware, is a program run jointly by National Grid and NYSERDA. The goal is to provide guaranteed bill savings to customers participating in National Grid's Energy Affordability Program. That is a program that is available to all low-income customers who qualify, and is a program replicated in other utilities as well. This program was originally proposed by National Grid and NYSERDA, and a total of 300 megawatts was approved by the Public Service Commission for the first phase of the ESFA. In the first round of the first phase, which was an RFP that we released last year, 120.5 megawatts were selected, and the second round will be for up to 179.5 megawatts. Just as with the first round, NYSERDA will manage this process. We are planning to opening the RFP around the same time as the ICSA, late August, early September, and are targeting notification of the selected projects during the fall. As Sarah has emphasized, projects that are enrolled in Expanded Solar for All may not receive the ICSA. In the first round of the ESFA, we canceled or returned ICSA funds if we had situations where a project had previously received an ICSA award. Certainly in this case, we encourage project owners to look at both options. If you are submitting bids to ESFA, we certainly encourage you to wait until the ESFA RFP runs its course. You know whether or not your project has been selected before you go ahead and submit an ICSA application. And more than anything else, that's just for administrative simplicity on our part and to save you some time as well. Next slide, please. So a very quick summary of the RFP structure. Just as with last time, projects will be submitting a compensation level bid. That's the percentage of your value stack compensation that you'll want to be paid, with the lowest bids being selected. If a project is selected, it will enroll in National Grid's Expand Solar for All tariff, and that tariff stipulates that all payments to the project will be made by National Grid directly to the project owner for the life of the project, or the 25-year life of the tariff. Now there will be some changes from round one. First, the maximum compensation level bid has been increased to 89%, or so we anticipate. Now that's the equivalent of offering. We usually, of course, talk about discounts in community solar. Sarah was just talking about all ICSA requirements in discount terms. So the equivalent discount to an 89% compensation is, of course, 11%. So that is the minimum discount to value stack that will be allowed this round, which is a higher maximum compensation level that projects are allowed. Now, unlike last round, no additional New York Sun incentives will be offered. The first round projects could bid in a request for additional New York Sun incentives. That will not be the case in the second round. Projects can, however, keep any New York Sun base incentives or community adder that they have already been awarded. an important element with respect to the availability of the low-income bonus tax credits, which Sarah described. We know that process will be running in kind of parallel or soon after the ESFA selection. So if a selected project receives an allocation of the Category 4 bonus credits, the compensation level of the project will automatically be decreased to 79%, i.e. the discount that the project will be providing to the pool of low-income customers will be 20%, with that 1% for National Grid's administration. Next slide, please. Okay, and for next steps, I will turn things back over to Sarah.
Great. Just next slide, please. All right. So just to remind everybody, this is kind of what the timeline was. And I think as Max mentioned, we're providing a preview of the final program rules now. The final rules themselves will be in the program manual. That'll come out in a couple of weeks. I think the latest will be by end of September. And we're talking about the National Grid ESFA and the ICSA at the same time because the programs themselves are going to be launched very close to each other. Next slide, please. For projects that are interested, for project teams that are interested in the ICSA, we wanted to let everybody know that in addition to those program rules that are going to be listed in the program manual for the ICSA, we're also producing a lot of step-by-step guides and templates for the new program. So we're going to have a guide to walk through the application, to walk through how to do the marketing and implementation plan. And then also, if you are awarded, I'm so sorry, the milestone and invoicing process and how that will work. The templates will also be on the resources for contractors page for round 2 projects. And then we're also going to have a section on the resources for contractors page, existing templates for round 1 projects, because round 1 projects will still have to use the round 1 templates. And so we'll make space for those as well. And included in the round 1 templates is going to be that opt-in request. If a round 1 project wanted to request to participate in the round 2 subscriber criteria. All right, and with that, next slide. I think we are done, and let's start the Q&A. So I'm going to take a minute to actually look at the Q&A. Max, feel free to dive in if you see anything you can quickly answer.
Thanks, Sarah. Before we jump into the Q&A, I know we have about 15 minutes left scheduled in this webinar. We'll try to get to as many questions as we can. However, we will also, if we do get a higher volume of questions, attempt to post an FAQ or other document that addresses some of them, and that would probably correspond with the launch of the program. On that note, one question we did get, I think throughout the webinar was just when will this launch? When we'll be able to submit applications? As you've probably gathered, we're quite close. I think to be conservative, I'd say by the end of September, but we're certainly hoping for more of the late August, early September timeline.
Okay, we had a question about, sorry, I jumped around a little bit. I think there was a question about the ICSA incentive for Con Ed, if both Community Adder and Community Credit Con Ed projects would receive that new incentive rate. It does say on the slide that it would be applicable for both Community Adder and Community Credit projects. Okay. See, sorry, my cursor isn't really working. Um, there was a question asking if there's no longer a 60% cap on LMI subscribers for a project. Just to clarify, there was never a 60% cap. The award was going to be a 40 to 60% award letter, and that continues to remain that way. So when you get your award letter, your contractual obligation will only be to, at minimum, 40% of the project being filled with ICSA eligible customers, up to 60% of the project um, going to ICSA eligible customers. If you go above that, that's when you might be eligible to get additional dollars through that high performance fund that I mentioned, but the award letter is still going to just say 60%. And there was never a cap. Apologies if that's kind of what you had interpreted. Someone wanted to ask why other categories like Medicaid were not added for the ICSA categorical eligibility. As I mentioned before, that was really a determination of our energy affordability team. I don't remember the specific details on why they told us to stick with the same list. I think it has to do with how that proxy information is submitted, or potentially like customers could get temporary Medicaid, and it's difficult to discern if temporary Medicaid is like if a customer's got temporary versus like permanent Medicaid. So I don't remember the specifics around it, but just to tell everybody that this really was a determination from our energy affordability team, and there are in-house low to moderate income experts, and so we're deferring to them. There was a question if someone were to secure the ICSA funding, are you also able to get the community adder as well? If you secure the ICSA funding, you need to offer that deeper 20% bill discount. That's really the only requirement here for the ICSA round 2. And if you're a round 1 project that wants to opt into that round 2 eligibility criteria, you will also have to opt into that rule about extending that 20% bill discount if you do receive the bonus tax credit, the category 4 bonus tax credit. Wondering if somebody from the NYSERDA team could indicate which questions I've already answered on this on the document. That'd be great.
Hi, Sarah. I can jump in with a few ESFA questions that have popped up while you review the list. So one question was yeah, so just some reinforcement. The two main ways that the round 2 of the ESFA differs from round 1 are lower discount rate requirement, 11% versus 20%, and no offer of additional incentive payments. That is correct. Yes, those are the two kind of key differences. Certainly, once the RFP comes out, review it closely for all requirements. Another question, is ESFA still only for National Grid projects? Yes, it is. It is just a National Grid program that was approved by the Commission. I will flag that a statewide Solar for All program has been proposed by the Department of Public Service. That proposal is open for comments on the DPS docket. I believe comments close on August 20th, so please check it out and file those comments. Along those lines, there was a question about why the ESFA um, uh, rules won't be the same as what was proposed in statewide Solar for All, specifically the eligibility for the community adder. That's because for expanded Solar for All, we are following the rules that were set in the Commission's order about expanded Solar for All. Those specifically included a capacity cap as well as eligibility for the community adder and other aspects. That's the program we're working with. If in the future statewide Solar for All is approved in some form, we would support the implementation of those rules. Just quickly checking if I see other ESFA Not seeing any, I will turn things back to Sarah.
All right, thanks, Max. So we see a question about for portfolio submission, if the timeline of one project is impacted, does that impact the status of other projects? That's a really great question. It's something I believe the answer is no. That's definitely something that we will go back and look at and probably add to an FAQ that we put out. Is the market rate subscriber using the VEDAR rate or a 10% discount applied? The ICSA doesn't restrict the discount rate for market rate subscribers. So it's really the ICSA eligible subscribers that need to have that 10% discount. However, net crediting rules currently stand, the floor, if a project has one discount rate, it has to have it for everybody. I know that there is, I believe there was a webinar earlier today to talk about that. Let's see, we talked about the community credit question. What happens if a master meter building is serving both individual households as well as common area? Is it still considered under residential capacity? As I mentioned earlier, master metered accounts, they qualify for the ICSA as non-residential subscribers. If you want them to qualify as residential capacity, there has to be some kind of pass-through or pass-through value. The value has to be distributed amongst the residents. A portion of the value has to be distributed amongst the residents. There are details early on the slide on how a master metered property would have to demonstrate that to NYSERDA. Let's see. Somebody asked about the stability of the ICSA with other incentive adders. If they could clarify that question, I'm actually not sure what they mean. Okay. Somebody asked about the maturity of the project. What does the maturity of the project need to be to apply for this incentive? That actually was addressed. So a project needs to be in submitted, received, or approved status to apply, but we're not going to be able to award until that project, and when I say that, it's the parent New York Sun project has to be submitted, received, or approved status in order to apply for the ICSA. But we're not going to be able to award any project that is at an earlier stage than approved. So if your project isn't submitted or received, we are going to deprioritize the review. We're going to look at those approved projects first, but you're still welcome to submit that application. Somebody had a question about how the ICSA incentive amount works. John, why don't we actually go back to the milestone and submission slide, if you don't mind? It's the one with the like really big like table that says milestone submission on it. Perfect, great. So somebody had a question about that 50% that's kind of listed under in the calculation. So the way that the payments work is that whatever that award is, the award amount is split so that you get 50% upfront, 25% at milestone 2, and 25% at milestone 3. But what that actual kind of amount will be based on that actual capacity. So if you've got an award for 60% ICSA, which is what everybody's going to get, that's the award letter they're going to get, and you hit that 60%, the calculation will be 60% times whatever that incentive rate is, times like 50% of that total award amount. If you only have 55% of the customers at project completion, 55%, by the way, being a great number, the actual capacity number will change. So it would be 55% representing the actual number of subscribers times the incentive rate times like 50% of the total award amount. So I hope that answers it. We do describe that in pretty in depth in the program rules. So please look at the program rules, but also let me know if you have additional confusion. So John, feel free to go back to the Q&A slide. Okay. We had a question. This is actually a really good question. We'll put this in the Q&A and or we'll put this in the final FAQs. But we had a question about for ICSA 1.0 projects that wish to transition to the 2.0 rules. Do the door-to-door sale requirements apply retroactively, or can you confirm that the customers that were signed up prior to the existence of the new requirements are okay, as long as the new signups, once NYSERDA accepted the project transition to the 2.0 rules? We will make a note on like the timing of when you sign up customers, like when it's okay to apply them retroactively versus not. That's a really good question, and we'll put some nuance around that. So Max, I don't know if you have looked at 16 and 17 yet, and you wanted to address those. If you already have, and I missed that, I can keep going.
Thanks, Sarah. I believe I did address those two, but there was one more ESFA question that I'll tackle, which was a question about the I read it as the value from NYSERDA for projects that are selected for ESFA. So again, unlike the first round, there is no added NYSERDA incentive or value. Project essentially keeps what it already has. The value that we anticipate that project owners will see in the program is to be able to receive payment over the full 25 years of the project directly from National Grid for the project's entire capacity. But there will be no additional NYSERDA incentive. There will be no additional NYSERDA contract. A project that is selected through the process will effectively be referred to National Grid for enrollment in the expanded Solar for All tariff.
Okay, great. I am looking at the questions. Let's see. Just going back to a question that we got, stability of the ICSA with other incentive adders. That question was around stackability. Thank you for confirming that you had a typo. ICSA is stackable with everything except for the multifamily adder. So if a project is receiving the affordable multifamily adder, I forget the specific name of it, it will be in the final program rules. That is the only one that you cannot stack with the ICSA. The other one is that if you have ESFA, I know we've stressed this a couple of times, you cannot also receive the ICSA. So if you are doing ICSA and you decide you want to enroll in ESFA, you're going to have to cancel your ICSA award. So for the NYSERDA folks, I did answer 8. So feel free to remove that one. Somebody had a question about the high performance fund. Yes, those will be SEEF funds, and in terms of the size of that fund, it will be, if every project was awarded and they were able to get 80% of the projects subscribed with ICSA customers, that they would be able to be compensated. So that's really kind of what we're able to do with that high performance fund. For everybody's context, we will have a dashboard on the website. I think it will be in the dashboard section that will show when a project has been able to commit the high performance fund. So you will be able to see kind of how it's going throughout the program. Can a project built on an affordable housing property and all the subscribers of that property, should they be the multifamily affordable housing incentive or ICSA? They should be the multifamily affordable housing incentive. Thank you so much for asking that question. I kind of, in respecting just trying to get through all the content, it's something I didn't outline, and that will be in the program rules. If an LMI customer lives in a private affordable housing that is sub-metered and the LMI customer Oh, we're at 2:30. Oh, right. Thanks, Max. Thanks for letting me know. So I think we're done here. Thanks everybody so much. Please keep your questions coming. Please send them to the Community Solar inbox. Thank you so much for coming today. And we just appreciate the time. And it was a lot of content. We really tried to keep it under an hour, but of course that can be hard. So we appreciate everybody taking the time, and have a great rest of your day. And I think that's it. I think we're signing out. Max, did you want to say any final words?